if you've got questions. Now I want to introduce our speakers. I'm going to introduce both of them at the same time since I think they're both kind of speaking in tandem. And so I'll start with Dr. Beth Dennard. She has spans 40 years of working in public relations in the U.S. Air Force, served as a admissions officer for the Air Force Academy and as the director of college guidance for 2 private schools in the Houston area. In 1999, she created Bright Futures Consulting to fulfill her dream to help students launch themselves successfully in the adult world. So now she works with mentorships and support and training programs with other professionals. Next, we have Dr. Monica Della Guardia, right? Did I do that right? And her husband are physicians from Monterrey, Mexico. They moved to the United States in 1993 to continue their postgraduate education and start a family. She is licensed in professional counseling and more than 10 years of experience treating adults with depression and anxiety. Most recently, Monica joined Bright Futures Consulting, where she provides bilingual education guidance for families. So now let me welcome Dr. Beth Dennard and Dr. Monica Della Guardia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so Monica, Dr. Della Guardia is going to start the presentation. She's going to be talking about more of the personal growth issues related to the COVID struggles. So Monica, do you want to share your screen?
Yes.
Thank everybody for taking time out of their busy day to be on this call. I know people have a lot to do these days, especially with the weather getting hotter and planning those Mother's Day barbecues and whatnot. You know, thanks for tuning in.
And thanks for having us. Well, these days we are facing a situation we cannot control, forced to live in a different way, which we are not prepared. Or are we? With this pandemic, our anxiety level is very high because we are experiencing all kinds of fears. Fear of getting sick, fear of financial loss, of being isolated, losing the American way of life. So what is anxiety? It is a sensation our body generates as a reaction to a mental or physical threat. So it is just simply a danger signal, and without it, we cannot survive. It is an unconscious automatic survival response. And because it is unconscious, it is very important to be aware, to make it conscious so we can do something about it. Otherwise, may cause us all kinds of stress, physical stress, psychological, emotional, but it really represents a moral survival response. And it is not who we are. That's very important that we think about anxiety in this way. It's just an amoral survival response, not who we are, and it is just simply a danger signal to survive. So, who we really are as human beings is our conscious brain. Let's think about this. So to start taking control of our anxiety, let's get rid of the word anxiety. Separate identity from human. So this way, we may use the phrase, my stress hormones are elevated, instead of I have an anxiety, or diagnose us as having anxiety. So just think about this way, my stress hormones are elevated. And because we can decrease our body's level of stress hormones in different ways, that's why it is very, very important to be aware of the anxiety level before it comes harder to control. Because as we know, there's so many levels, and we don't want to feel the level of being terrified. So by taking care of ourselves and those around us, we can control the level of stress hormones, and I guess it's time to call for the happiness hormone. Going to the basics, you know, we all know that it's very important to get plenty of sleep, eat healthy, engage in exercise as much as possible. Try to normalize. It's not as easy as I may say, but it's very important if we think about it this way. Also, it is very important to be kind of yourself, kind of those around you, particularly in this kind of stress moment that we are living. And there are all kind of strategies. For example, for some people may work expressive writing. For others, meditation may give them happiness, or just mitigate a little bit the anxiety level. Forgiveness is another one. Or for other people, it's just learning to be with it, making aware, be aware, and just learning to be with some pain. Also, for other ones or for everybody, it's important to create a routine, to communicate, as a team, assign specific roles in the household that we have, so we can just coordinate and everybody, making everybody feel part of the team. And just by taking care of ourselves and those around us, we can control the level of stress hormones. And this is something that is important for us to realize. So the way that Bright Futures take care of its working team, for example, it's by praying, communicating, and having fun. We help parents reduce their anxiety level by giving them information, and also students to better know themselves with the Bergman assessment, and also by empowering them to be their very best. So I encourage you to proactive or practice what really works for you to produce happy hormones. And because, as I mentioned, it is up to us to control our choices and to create a state of mind balance. Thank you. Here is Dr. Dennard.
Thank you, Monica. So now that we're all in this very wonderful state of mind after hearing Monica's melodious voice, I want to throw this slide up, which is a photograph taken on September 3rd, 1967. So we're shifting from Monica's very practical and more scientific approach to understanding sort of the panic and the fears and the emotions that go along with the COVID-19 series that the Chamber is sponsoring. And they're real. Feelings are real. So if you look at this picture, and if you really look at it closely, you can see some people almost like having coffee in the middle of the street. You know, this is the day that Sweden changed their traffic pattern. They went from driving on the left-hand side of the road to the right-hand side of the road. So apparently some people didn't get the memo. The news media, you know, maybe didn't do their job quite well, but you see it's pandemonium, it's chaos. But some people are handling it better than others. Are my slides not showing up? Because somebody's saying they're not getting the slide. Okay. So the bottom line is our boat has been rocked, but it hasn't capsized. I've lived in the Clear Lake area for over 30 years. I love the Clear Lake area. I've had opportunities to move out and I stay and I just maybe move into a different house, but I love this area, the boating, the water, the recreational boating business is the third largest in the country. So I thought I would throw up the image of just a boat. Our boat has been rocked, no question about it. But most of our boats have not capsized. And that's a really important point to make. Next slide, please. So as business owners, I've even heard it said that we we're born for times like these because we, as entrepreneurs, do things a little bit differently. I'm a small business owner. Yes, I was in the military, as Cindy Deweese explained, and I have worked in education, which is a very lockstep process. Our educational system is much like an assembly line, but being a small business owner is really my true self, in that it's creative, and we respond to situations. When we had of course, we have a lot of hurricanes around here. So I think people in the Clear Lake area, the Bay Area, are more adept, more agile when it comes to pandemics or any kind of major stressors in our world. And we see the opportunity. I was just talking with a young man. I'm a mentor for the Wolf Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Houston. And I was speaking to Greer Grayson, who's going to be launching his new business. He graduates this week and he launches his new business in June. So truly an entrepreneur. And he now is he's been working for the small business SBDC. And he said that he's spoken to many stressed business owners. And each of them have pretty much most of us have dealt with the same problems, but each of the business owners has very different responses to the problems. Some of them, when the disaster relief came from for the PPP, the payroll loans, some of us were just seeing it as a great blessing. Others were seeing it as a big stressor, working with the banks and whatnot. So everybody responds to stress differently, like Monica was saying, but I want to encourage people that are listening to see the opportunities that are right there in front of our nose. We sometimes can't see them because we are having a lot of emotional feelings. Okay, so the next slide, please. And what I wanted to share with you was this crisis model. Of course, it's a very simplified one. At the top, we see routine. And then, of course, we love our routine. You know, people in business, we love checking things off our list, getting things done. I know I was just telling Ms. Sweeney and Ms. Deweese that, they're busy. I see the chamber people out and about all the time, and their routine has been shifted, and it's by the crisis. So the next circle is the crisis. Okay. Then the range of feelings, which Dr. De La Guardia explained. We have a lot of feelings, and I call that the heart. So at Bright Futures Consulting, we handle issues of the heart and we handle issues of the head. So because we work with teenagers and families, there's a lot of emotions working with teenagers. Can I just hear an amen on that? Their emotions are very high, and adolescence is a time when there's just a lot of crazy emotions and hormones going on in young people. And we are really masters at helping families deal with some of those feelings, as well as helping them with the transitions, which is the actions that go along. So right now, what we're in is we're having the feelings still, even though we're phasing out of the shelter in place, and we're getting more and more businesses are opening. So we're shifting from that mentality of hunker down, which we're used to doing in this hurricane alley, to coming out into the world. I picture the Wizard of Oz when the Munchkins are coming out, and Dorothy lands in Oz, or she lands in Munchkin land, and come out, wherever you are. We're all coming out, and there's a new normal. And what I want to emphasize, that's why I have the word Berkman at the bottom, and Monica mentioned the Berkman. The Berkman is like an MRI on your personality. And the reason why I use Berkman with teenagers, with young people, and I do have adult clients as well, but the reason why I use Berkman and not any other assessment is because it dives deep into an individual's needs. and their stress reaction when their needs are not met. So let's just take, for example, I'll talk about my own stress reaction. So I'm kind of a control freak. I like to be in control. I was in the military. I'm retired military, business owner, educator. Okay, you get the picture. So while this crisis unfolded, my daughter's childcare closed. So she has 2 toddlers. And so all of a sudden, I became the caregiver for the toddler grandchildren. And the new normal was I am also housing her family while all kinds of things happened in her life. And so my need to control was suddenly completely thrown out the window. I was no longer working in my business. I was taking care of toddlers. And I had to let my team, Monica and Claire and Elena, my team of 7, basically run my company. And it's worked really, really well. So next slide, please. That's an example. My Berkman need is to control, but my stress reaction is to over control. Some of you might relate to that. Okay, so the heart is the feelings, the grief, the anger. You know, we don't want to use the word anxiety, as Monica said. We call it stress hormones. But I think as business owners, we might even have some guilt and maybe even some shame. I know actually one of my employees, her mother was furloughed, and she's probably the best dental hygienist in the whole city of Houston. She's extremely sought after. She's very professional, very good. And the dental practice where she works furloughed her. She had never been out of work since she's probably 18 years old. I'm sure her dentist felt some shame and some guilt about that because letting his senior employee go. And probably lots of us are saying we should have, would have, could have, because there is a very strong sense of right and wrong and conscientiousness with business owners. We take it very personally when we can't pay people, when we can't come through for them. And I just want to encourage you guys to let yourself off the hook. Really be gentle with yourself, as Monica was encouraging, because I don't think now is a time, it's not productive to blame yourself and to hang on to that guilt. If there's been any missteps, let yourself off the hook and forgive yourself and forgive others. Okay, the next slide, please. Because if you really think about it, if we're stuck in our feelings, which maybe some people still are, it's hard to move forward. Working with teenagers, when they're hanging on to their high school experience, they can't move on into their college experience. If we're hanging on to the trauma of being quarantined and, all that went with it, all the face masking and all the hand sanitizer and all that, some of those we want to take forward, maybe, but some of those things we need to leave behind. And so do a post-virus evaluation. If you have time, if you don't have time, make the time. Stay up a little bit later, have an extra cup of coffee in the morning, and write down the answers to these questions. What surprised you the most? Who did and who didn't rise to the challenges that the pandemic presented? And what did you notice about consumer behavior? And I'm really asking you to tap into what's in your heart. You guys are smart, successful business owners. You would not, I'll tell you, it's the hardest thing in the world to start a business, and you've done it. You've already done the hardest thing. Now being able to evaluate kind of like what went right and what went wrong, but even more deeply, what surprised you? Who on your team really did a great job and just worked circles around everybody else, and maybe who struggled, not in a condemning way, but just to kind of note those things. Okay, the next slide, please. It's really important to evaluate because guess what? There will be another crisis. And then I get into making a crisis action plan. And at the end, I do know an attorney, actually my office is right around the corner from his, Phil Griffiths. And I know I went to a webinar or a presentation that his company did on writing up these plans. Crisis communication, crisis action plans are very important because we will have another one, absolutely. And what we want to do is to get stronger and more prepared for the next crisis. I want to also say that the operations side of this, What I really saw happening in my own company, and maybe in the chamber as well, and maybe in the business owners that are listening, is that the non-critical operations just stopped happening. The things that really weren't essential, and the critical operations continued. So the things that were kind of nice to do, but they aren't essential, they stopped. So really, kind of like the fluff and the fat got set aside. So maybe you focused more on customer service. And if you did, you're still in business. I guarantee it. And try to integrate the lessons that you learned from the COVID-19 and build a crisis action plan with those critical operations in mind. Next slide, please. Before I talk about values and leadership, I want to say, working with the Chamber this week, especially Montea and the other young employees at the Chamber of Commerce, Cindy does such a great job hiring amazing people. And after a crisis, being so young and going through this crisis, I have to tell you, you're more valuable as an employee than you ever would have been without handling a crisis. Everyone who's more experienced in business knows that you learn so much more during a crisis than you do during normal day-to-day business operations. Normal day-to-day cannot grow a person or an employee or a leader like a crisis can. So during a crisis, leaders take care of people. That's the number one thing that leaders need to do. So in your crisis action plan, you might have the first chapter, how can I take care of people? What are some action steps I need to do? Well, guess what? Put your oxygen mask on first. I know that's kind of trite, and it's said, of course, on the airlines, but it's really true as a business owner. If you're strung out and working 12-hour shifts, you really can't take care of other people if you're not taking care of yourself. And I found, I always find, especially being in the military, I handled a lot of crisis communications, and we ended up communicating a whole lot more during a crisis, both internally and with the public through the news media. So communication revs up. So in your plan, you might actually call for hiring a communications person or an additional contract worker to handle communications. Like I found taking care of my grandchildren, I had to delegate pretty much everything to my team. And, you know, I would say 7 years ago, my team was just me. I only had myself. And so I've grown my company, and as a result, I was able to delegate more. And maybe that's something some of you are considering. Deepening your relationships with fellow business owners. So when I talked to the young man who works for SBDC, he said that a lot of stress was coming from the bank, applying for these loans, basically. People were stressed out with it. And of course, it was a stressful process. But I can tell you, my relationships with my banker friends, I fell back on those relationships. I needed friends in the banking world, and they came through for me. And I mean, so if you don't have relationships with other business owners, and I know the Chamber of Commerce really fosters that, now is a time to really build those relationships. One of the lady, the young woman who's helping me with marketing and with copy editing, proofreading, and all kinds of things that her company does. Her company is called Focus Copy, and her name is Lauren Jefferson. She was telling me that her company has just grown and grown and grown during this pandemic. And she's done more networking and more reaching out. And she's deepened her relationships with even the alumni from her college. Just her relationships have just skyrocketed. And so that's actually could be one of the values that your company is known for, is the relationships that you value and growing and maintaining those relationships, especially with fellow business owners. Next slide, please. So what will you do differently? And I want to just say, again, going back to Lauren Jefferson, we met this morning for me to record my podcast. And she said that when she was in church, her pastor, well, she wasn't in church. She was doing the, online church or the live streaming. And her pastor asked, what have you learned during the pandemic. And one man said that he was a workaholic, kind of like True Confessions. I was a workaholic. He said, I never ate dinner with my family, but now I'm making time to have dinner and hang out with my family. So actually this crisis has had a very rich outcome for him. It has shifted his focus. He's not as worried maybe about earning and supporting his family. And then Lauren told me that her business is growing more and more. Like I mentioned, it's grown more than it has in her whole career during the pandemic. Some people are opening up new offices and expanding during this time. Now, restructuring, like I mentioned, look at your critical operations, what is critical and what worked, what didn't work. Ask your customers, convene a focus group, which is basically a group you can randomly select from your customers and just ask them, maybe have somebody from the chamber facilitate a focus group. I'm sure they don't exactly have time to do all that, but if you have somebody who is not you, because obviously if you're asking your customers to give you feedback, they may not want to tell you to your face, or conduct, a survey monkey and ask them, what are the services that they value the most that you provide? And are there any ideas that they come up with from a customer standpoint? I know Pedro, Pete Mora, is a friend of mine. He's also a graduate of the Wolf Center for Entrepreneurship at U of H. And he owns Fajita Pete's. If you've ever had fajitas from Fajita Pete's, you will never forget them. They're delicious. And when he was designing his company model, he felt like convenience was the biggest thing. And his first restaurant opened in West U, where people order out food, apparently a lot. So his model from the very beginning was different. When I went into his store, there were 3 or 4 cafe tables. That was it. I was like, this is not a restaurant. He said, you're right. Most of our business is takeout or delivery. And he started this company more than 10 years ago. But his model, I'm sure, worked really, really, really well during the pandemic. So ask yourself what you'll do differently. Next slide, please. So support resources are essential. I think as business owners, we're overly responsible. Maybe many of us are firstborn children. We take it to heart. We step up to the plate. All those trite sayings are really true about us. We don't want to let people down. And so as a result of our personalities, sometimes it comes into play with feeling like we are all alone. But I really want to encourage you to join the Chamber of Commerce. You obviously probably are if you're on this virtual webinar. And reach out to the SBDC. Have them as a ready resource. They're the ones that had the money, the connections with the money, and there's still loans to be had for payroll and for your rent, for your whatever you're paying for your office spaces. Rotary is a great organization to join, and there's a lot of service that Rotary does. I used to work with a coach, one of the Vistage coaches, and she was wonderful because when I had to do hard things like fire people, which was the hardest thing I've ever had to do as a business owner, she was there to coach me and encourage me and give me a framework for how to do that. Also, networking groups. My friend Lauren Jefferson, she's been doing virtual networking groups. They're doing a post-COVID networking group. Actually, I think it's scheduled for next week or something. And I mentioned Phil Griffith, who's a fellow. He's in my office building over here on Space Park. He's an attorney, and he does help small businesses writing up their plans, whether it's a crisis action plan or whether it's a crisis communication plan or other plans that really support your customers and your employees, and doing it in a legal way. I think there was something else I wanted to say here. Back to Grayson, who's opening up a support services company. I thought this was really insightful of him. He said that the business owners, when they call in to the SBDC and they ask for help, or they just want to share their story, they've told him that they appreciated the human compassion and active listening that he provided. That's huge. Again, you're not alone. You need not be alone. Have someone you can trust, someone that you can confide in. Now, he was kind of a nameless, faceless guy at the small business office, but he was able to provide compassion, understanding, and to really encourage them and assure them that he is understanding and working with them to offer and build confidence in moving forward. And I want to do that with you today. I want to encourage you that, number one, we're Texans, and Texas is a great state, and we're Houston strong. Not only that, we're in the Clear Lake area, and this area is a magical place to live and to work. And I'm very appreciative of being in this community, and the Chamber of Commerce really brings it together. My next slide is kind of hearkening back to my research side. As a doctor of education, I did a lot of research. And one of the researchers, one of my favorite ones, is Carol Dweck. She's a Stanford University researcher. She talks about growth mindsets. And I feel like business owners, we're kind of a scrappy group where when we have a hardship, we don't give up very easily. We find a way. I was even thinking that some of the people that, well, actually Lauren was sharing that she knows a florist who, because of her listening to her customers, she created 10 sort of sub-businesses, sort of like side hustle businesses along with her floral business. And because she created these 7 or 8 side hustles, she has one business left after the crisis. And it's because she is a person who asks, how can I grow from this crisis? How can I stay in business? How can I keep paying my bills? I'm not going to give up. And so I know that the Chamber is a great resource. If I can be a resource to any of you all, offering whether it's the Berkman or some support if you need to look for another job, I'm happy to do it. I have coached people through job transitions, and my team members and I do that, as well as the college planning piece. But I wanted to end with this last slide. We've got the little butterfly there on this slide, but the next slide is a picture of my granddaughter, Eliza, as we were heading out to ride bikes. Her mom noticed that there were some caterpillars, and then there was the pupa, which is the stage before they hatch. And she captured the pupa and some of my passion fruit leaves and put them in a jar as Eliza's science project. And one morning we woke up, we do check it every morning, and we noticed that the butterfly had hatched. And it's a monarch butterfly, as you can see. And my granddaughter, and my daughter were just both so excited. And it kind of created this energy and this enthusiasm for life and for possibilities at a time when we were all shut in pretty much into my house. And I have to say that picture will be the one picture that defines the COVID crisis for me, because it just gave us all a lot of hope to see the butterflies. And we even saw them this morning when we went out riding bikes, and we saw so many monarch butterflies. And what I want to encourage you guys, whether you've made changes that are temporary just to get through this crisis, or you've made lasting changes in your policies and your values, I want to encourage you to maybe integrate a repause into your company in some shape or form. It could be a picnic. It could be something you do with your family. But to repause and remember, don't let this lesson kind of go away too easily. I think we're all too ready to get back in our cars and get back on the freeway. And if you've done that, you see the freeways are already bumper to bumper. And it saddens me, but it's just the American way, I guess. But I want to encourage you to maybe repause. And now I can take questions. I do have a little something I can share if there aren't any questions, but I want to make sure we answer all the questions if there are any.
No specific questions just yet. So we would love to hear your story.
Okay. Well, this is from when I knew the Chamber reached out to us. I was having my morning devotion. I read Jesus Calling. And I thought it was just perfect for this presentation. It says, And Sarah Young is the author of Jesus Calling. It's a daily devotion that I've been doing for probably 6 or 7 years since my husband had cancer. It says, welcome problems. That's a novel approach. Welcome problems as perspective lifters. It says, my children, and this is Jesus talking in this devotion, my children tend to sleepwalk through their days until they bump into an obstacle that stymies them. If you encounter a problem with no immediate solution, your response to that situation will take you either up or down. You can lash out at the difficulty, resenting it and feeling sorry for yourself, and this will take you down into a pit of self-pity. Alternatively, the problem can be a ladder, enabling you to climb up and see your life from my perspective. Viewed from above, the obstacle that frustrated you is only a light and momentary trouble. Once your perspective has been heightened, you can look away from the problem altogether. Turn toward me and see the light of my presence shining upon you. So I hope you can imagine a different and maybe more creative future, and that we can move forward together out of the quarantine into not just the doors of Walmart to buy more stuff, but into another phase of our lives that's maybe more creative, more intentional. Maybe it does include more of a pause and appreciation for people and for the work that we do. And maybe we leave the work we do and we do something differently. And that's, it kind of gives you a chance to evaluate and recreate going forward. I know Cindy, when we were getting ready for this presentation, she said that some of the people in the chamber have decided to go ahead and retire. And maybe, that's one option. I mean, some people are growing their business even more. Some are stopping what they're doing and doing something differently. So I think it gives us sort of a punctuation mark in our lives, a period or a comma, and we can pause and reflect. And I really would encourage you, like Monica said, to journal. And if you did a log of events, in the military, we're big on log of events, what happened, what time things happened, the airplane crashed, the emergency vehicles responded, we had all these logs of events that we had to maintain. And going back and looking at that log after the event and evaluating and understanding how could we have responded better? How could we have been maybe more prepared, maybe more humane, maybe more thoughtful, more kind, more wise? So anyway, as we move into reopening Texas, I wanted to just leave you with some of these ideas. And I really appreciate Monica with the part that she gave, which really is important to manage your stress. Don't let it get to the terrified stages. The media feeds that, by the way. So if you have to manage the amount of TV you watch, then manage the amount of TV you watch, because they tend to spiral. Mm-hmm.
I agree. Definitely. Just real quick though, someone asked, is there one particular question or discussion a business should have when their employees come back? When we get everybody gets back from working at home and all that kind of thing, is there something that should be discussed or focused on in the beginning to get, they weren't sure how to ask it, but
that's a great question. That's a fantastic question. I want to see if Monica has something from her point of view before I jump in.
No, go ahead, Dr. Dennard.
Because I think the most important thing you can ask people is, how are you? How are you doing really? And maybe before they even show up, have them bring one story, like my story of my granddaughter and the butterfly. Maybe there's one story that came out of it, and it could be a sad or an angry story, but to bring a story that kind of gets at how they're feeling about coming back to work and coming back.
Great. Because for some folks, like you said, the gentleman who typically worked too much and never ate with his family, now he's making time to do that. And when things get back to close to what they were before, perhaps, how does he deal with that? How does he handle that if he can't control his time to continue to have those dinners with his family and stuff? So I think that's going to add huge anxiety on the backside.
Well, and it's time to have a conversation with the boss. I mean, and maybe the boss never expected him to put in all that overtime. Maybe the boss, maybe that's really something that he drives himself so hard into, heart problems and family problems. And, we do this to ourselves mostly. I have been, like I said, I tend to be more of a controller. Trying to control things I can't control is one of my needs. And chaos just makes me want to control more, and it's counterproductive. I have to just back away and, really talk to myself and have my quiet time and do my journaling, because my natural tendency is to want to, take control. And really, that's the last thing anybody that works for me. I have very competent people who work for me, like Monica, super highly educated, super competent. And the last thing they need is for me to get in their way.
Good point.
So I guess for business owners, try not to reestablish the same old. Maybe try to mix it up and do things a little bit differently. If you've always had the company picnic on Memorial Day weekend, maybe we're going to have it on the 4th of July, the Friday before the 4th of July weekend this year. Make some changes that maybe are fun and maybe are people get a say. I think because we haven't had a say, we've been quarantined, having people have more of a voice and have more control. People haven't had control. And so if they've been wanting to have an office on the south side of the building and somebody else wants their old office, maybe they change offices. I mean, simple little changes that can help people feel more comfortable and like they get a fresh start. Little things with the environment can really make a big difference.
Fresh start. I love that. Thank you.
Snacks, you guys.
We like chocolate here, so.
I feel like snacks are great. I've been feeding these toddlers and they eat all the time, but it's like having snacks at your office. Maybe like as a rule, we're going to have snacks all the time. We're going to have snacks, free snacks. They do it at Google headquarters. It works, guys. It works.
I love it. Cindy?
I'm muted.
No, you're not.
I'm not? Oh, okay.
No, we can hear you.
Oh, good. I'm glad. Thank you. Well, ladies, thank you very, very much. Your words of wisdom were very encouraging to folks, and I appreciate you taking the time. I know Dr. Dennard said that she appreciated all of us taking the time, but really it was our pleasure, and it was you all really brought a great program. We were talking one day here about, okay, the people's anxiety level is so high, and we tend to try to just bring business programs. How do you make your business better? One of the ways to make your business better is to make yourself better. And so you certainly did help us with that, and we appreciate that. And I was early on, I listened to Christian radio, and there was a pastor on the radio station one day that said, I keep hearing, when are we going to get back to normal? And he said, I want us to get back to better. And so this is one way we can get back to better, is to focus on ourselves and see how can we readjust, how can we realign, and we get back to better together. And so we can't wait to be together again. But I just really appreciate both of you for being on with us today. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you. This was really fun. Thank you, Monica, for being my teammate. It was great.
Yeah.
Great to see you guys. I feel like I need to run across the street to the chamber and just have coffee with you now.
Well, just stand at one side of the glass, and we'll be on the other side and wave and have coffee together.
That's right.
Well, when do you guys reopen? When do you reopen?
Well, we hoped to on Monday, but just reading more of the governor's order, we just felt like we needed to. Now we're here. We've been here all along because we have businesses that need to come in and get some stuff done. And so we're here. We can unlock the door and collect the newspapers or whatever. And so, and make sure we go through the mail. So we've not really closed. We've just kept the door locked. So we're in our offices working hard. And we have 2 on the team that are working remotely. and then one that comes in part-time, and then Sherry and I are always here. so
We live here, Beth, you know.
yeah. Yeah. We
I know
can't.
you do.
We
I
had
know.
anxiety over not going to work. You know, oh my gosh, I have to go to the chamber. And so,
The question is, when do all the Mexican restaurants let us come in? You know, we get the food delivered, but we really want to be in the Mexican restaurant having our food and mariachis and all that.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, we did do Mexican food on Cinco de Mayo, and it was delicious. So
Great, great. So is it May 31st then that you're going to open your doors?
well, I'm hoping to on the 18th, or after the 18th, after the governor
Okay.
speaks on the 18th, and we'll see if we can't get that going by then and unlock the doors and get the cobwebs knocked down.
Well, thank you for your leadership. Appreciate it. This was a great
Well,
idea to put this out there. And, you know, if you, now, do you have the final slides? Monica, did you share the final slides with them? So I know she was going to email Montoya the final slides. So if people want them, I know you recorded this session, but if people want the slides,
Okay.
Yeah, we would love that. People
Yeah.
typically ask. The other thing is sometimes people email us after the fact when the question does pop in their mind. So if it does, I am going to send it to you ladies and try to get those answers. Because sometimes, you know, while they're absorbing it all and taking notes, they're not thinking of everything. But they're welcome to email me, and they do. So I'll let you guys know.
Okay, Sherry.
Of course, and we will send the presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Awesome. We would love that.
And also, I think I asked Montoya to share the link that you put on your website with us, and we'll put it on our website, and we'll cross, you know, we'll reference that it's on your
Perfect.
website. Yeah.
Great.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again.
Okay.
I just have a couple of closing announcements for everyone that's still on the call. Next Wednesday, May the 13th, we have a Young Professionals webinar, Creating Momentum in Time of Renewal. So put that on your calendar. And then next Thursday, our next COVID-19 webinar with Bouncing Back, Preparing Employees to Return to Work, which I think is very timely. Don't forget to register on our website, check your calendar and your emails for the programming, and we look forward to seeing you all next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.